Alright, so this is going to be a tutorial on high quality ripping sound font stuff. And tutorials are stupid when they start with a huge boring intro, so I'm going to get right into it. The main thing I'm going to be doing is recreating my puzzles rip, Professor Layton puzzles, because it only took me like 10 minutes to make it originally, which is really weird for me. Usually it takes me way longer. So I figure that might be good for a tutorial. Sorry. But first I'm going to go through like a few systems and just kind of describe how you might rip from them. First off, NES. FamiTracker is obviously the most accurate way to do it. Now there is a way to turn an NSF into a FamiTracker file. Now the problem there is it goes 60 actions per second, and so it's kind of unruly to work with. I did that with the Jetsons. I did make it in FamiTracker with this 60 FPS thing that's going wildly fast, because I didn't do that much to it. I did the nutjack, and I did some changes to the triangle wave channel. Do-do-do-do. You know, it's a pretty simple edit to do. So that was one way to do it. Another way would be not doing it 60 actions per second, because you just converted an NSF to the format, but actually recreating it from scratch in FamiTracker. Another way would be getting a wave of the 4 channels and just pitch shifting, like take a sample from one of those isolated tracks and pitch shift it, and that's kind of the hacky way to do it. I'm not really that experienced with NES, so I can't really talk about it. The same thing goes for Game Boy. There is a way to convert a Game Boy GSF, is it? I don't know. GBS into a FamiTracker file. That's not as accurate since FamiTracker's for NES, not Game Boy. You can also do the isolating a track and taking a sample from it thing for Game Boy. Once again, I don't really know that much about it, so I shouldn't talk about it. Genesis, I might do a video on Genesis, but I've made a paste bin about Genesis ripping, and basically you can get a MIDI and the YM2612 presets from a VGM file, and so that's good. And with that, you can basically perfectly recreate a Genesis song in FL Studio. I should have had an example ready, actually. Hold on. The Jenny I have only works on FL8, so I've got FL8 just for Jenny stuff. I'm going to open IceCap. There we go. And the thing with this is I actually didn't bother making all the tracks work, because I think a good tip for high quality ripping is use something you recorded from the original console as much as possible. Like if you don't make any edits to a track and you can get that track from the game's sound files, use that, because that's going to be perfectly accurate. So like I only rendered out the bass and the Jetsons part. Why is it not playing there? Okay, well, it's not wanting to play there, whatever. There we go. Like, I only rendered out those tracks because those are the only tracks that I edited. So the rest of the tracks, I just used a recording of what the game puts out, and that way it's perfectly accurate. The same goes for SNES, like, Turtles in Time. First of all, I couldn't get that intro to recreate right in FL Studio, so I just copied the intro from a recording. And then I didn't do any changes to the drums, so for the drums I just used a recording instead of rendering out from FL Studio. As for SNES, VGM trans works for the most part with SNES games, but not all of them. And you want to make sure that you don't drag the whole ROM into VGM trans, you just drag the SPC file. And for the record, all these SPCs and VGMs, you can get them from Zophar's domain. That's a fantastic site for them. And Overclocked Remix might have some as well. But Zophar's domain has a huge amount of SNES and Genesis and NES and GB music files, the kind that you can actually rip MIDIs and DLS and SF2s out of. And as for SNES, if it doesn't work in VGM trans, you could record individual channels and sample out of them, just like you do with NES. And that's a more hacky way, and you probably won't get as good of results as if it was a game where you can open it in VGM trans and get a MIDI and a DLS. GBA, there's the GBA Muse Riper. That's how it's spelled. There's only one P, so it's the GBA Muse Riper. And if a GBA game works with it, then you've got full MIDI and full DLS/SF2 of it. If it doesn't work in that, if it doesn't use the sappy sound engine, you're fucked. There's nothing you can do, really. You can't even isolate channels of a GBA game that doesn't use that. So, thankfully, some games that do use it are Mother 3 and Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, and a lot of others. Wario Land 4 does. WarioWare doesn't. I think that's enough for console, so I'm just going to move on to DS, which is the one that I'm doing this tutorial of. For DS games, you can just drag the whole DS ROM into VGM trans, and it should find all the MIDIs, if there are any. I found that it didn't work with Layton 2, and I'm guessing it wouldn't work with Layton 3 or 4 either. But it did work with Layton 1. It does work with Ace Attorney, Investigations, whatever, any Ace Attorney. Although some of the GBA games might not have the best output. You might notice there's a lot of Gyakuten Saiban rips, as opposed to Phoenix Wright DS rips. And that's because the GBA songs aren't super accurate in VGM trans. Anyway, so here we are. I dragged the ROM into VGM trans. Now I need to find puzzles. And for that, you can just play the songs. That's not puzzles. That's not puzzles. That's puzzles. Hey, that was easy. And VGM trans might crash randomly when you're playing MIDIs. Well, it doesn't really matter. It's a finicky program, but it does work. So I found puzzles. I right-click, save as MIDI and DLS. Sure. I'll just save them here. I don't know. And there they are, DLS and MIDI. Now, before I get into editing puzzles, I do want to talk about some things that I don't have to do with puzzles, but are important to know. I've got Battle Wild Pokemon open here. So, I want to talk about automation, because I think a thing that a lot of people don't realize when they're starting out, they change the volume on one of their tracks and play it, and then, oh, it went back to where it was. That's annoying. The thing is, it's because of channel volume. This track, and you'll see here there's a couple changes in volume in it, but basically this automation is the reason why you can fiddle with this knob all you want, but as soon as you press play, it goes back to where it was. So let me just isolate channel 1 here, and we can just see how this little change in volume happens. Well, that's really neat. It's just like a little fade out of volume. It's barely even noticeable, but anyway, if you want to change the volume where the track is, where the track starts, option 1, if this is straight all the way through, or you don't care about these little changes, you can just delete all of this. Boom, it's gone, and now any changes you do to that knob will stay. Or you can draw your own volume. like it says in the top left, it's at 78%. I could just, okay, now it's here. Now it's at 56% instead. So, but that's the reason why you play it and suddenly, oh, the volume's back, oh, the pan is back. It's because of, let me show you here. On the left, current project, patterns. This is all the automation channels. It's kind of really annoying. But another thing is patch number. And once again, I'm sure a lot of people have tried changing the instrument and then the instrument changes back. It's because of the patch number automation. And you can see here in this, it changes quite a bit actually. Like here, it's French horn, I think is French horn. Now it's trumpet. Also, it doesn't always like to play the notes. Strings, back to trumpet, strings. So this is the reason why the instrument's changing, is this patch number automation. So it's something to keep in mind. You can mess with it if you want, but that's why the patch number, aka the instrument that the channel's using, might be changing and you don't realize why. It's because of these, all of these channels. Another very important one can be pitch, but it doesn't look like this song has any changes in pitch. So, or this, I guess channel 6 goes down in pitch at one point. Anyway, that's what I want to say about that. So, I'm going to play my finished puzzle rip here. So it's puzzle room. You know, that's punny, right? There was another Leighton rip like the previous day before I made this, and so it was kind of on my mind. I kind of want to do a Leighton rip because I love Leighton, and I just thought the puzzle theme could turn into puzzle room. Maybe it was in my head, so I went ahead and tried it, and it turned out a lot better than I thought it would. And so it's, I think not only does it sound good, but obviously it's extremely punny. And I like to make pun rips, personally. Like, I usually have a reason, a punny reason for changing a song into another song. More so than knowing they'll go well together. Although obviously I do try to choose things that'll go well together. Alright, so I have MIDI and DLS from VGM Trans. Open the MIDI in FL Studio. Something very important is Fruity LSD. You'll need that to actually be able to hear what the heck's going on. But it automatically sets you up with all that if you're in FL Studio 11. I know back in FL Studio 8, which I was using years ago, you had to like put Fruity LSD in yourself, and it was really annoying. Close some of this while it's opening. Alright, so obviously you play it back and it's fucking Windows garbage. The important button is this, open a new bank. And well, oh, I hope there's nothing too secret here. No, I don't think so. So here's the DLS. Now, I suggest using DLS over SF2 because you can just open this in LSD. If you're using an SF2, you have to replace the tracks with Fruity Sound Font Player, and that will get rid of the patch number changes that I mentioned earlier. So if you're trying to use the Sound Font Player, you might have to put in a lot more effort to make sure, oh, this didn't change from trumpet to French horn, it was always trumpet, so like, because you can't change the patch number of a Sound Font Player thing. And I also find the Sound Font Player renders in extremely low quality. Maybe my settings are wrong, but like, playback is fine, like real-time playback, but when I render with Sound Font Player channels, the quality is really low. And I don't have that problem with DLS. So now I open the DLS, now it sounds right. And your accuracy will really vary from game to game, console to console. Like once you have the MIDI and the DLS, usually it won't sound perfect like this does, especially if you're on SNES or N64. DS is usually pretty much perfect with what you get from VGM Trans. DS is very friendly for ripping. So like I was thinking through in my head, as far as like, I think a lot of people have trouble coming up with ideas for rips, and I have some trouble. Like, I mean, you can't really force something. You've got to let it come to you. So I was just thinking in my head, do 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 do. So I can do 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 do, like I had in my head. Maybe it could be Puzzle Room. So I open it up here, and an important thing to do is you want to preserve as much about the original song as you can to make a really truly high quality rip. You can't just copy one MIDI's notes into another. You will not get good results that way. Now, of course, I always use MIDI's as a reference, sure, but I don't copy paste because that just, it's not good. I like to recreate from a MIDI. So anyway, I'm going to open a Puzzle Room MIDI that I made actually. And so here it is. It goes A A C C A A G G A A A A A. Now, I don't know that much about key. Key is very important, and I don't actually know that much about it. I don't really know how to teach about key, but I will say it just has to do with what pitches get used in the song. Like, note that there is not a single A note in this entire song on any track. There just isn't any. There aren't any B's. There aren't any G's. There aren't any D's. Okay, there's a couple. So, Puzzle Room is AACCAAGG. We can't use AA and GG. That doesn't work. So you have to shift it to where it sounds right in the song that you're inserting it into. Another thing is you have to decide what tracks you're going to edit. And for this rip, I only changed this main track. I left all of this. Theoretically, I could have changed this track into like some kind of bass track from Puzzle Room or Continue, but I didn't feel that would really, I didn't think I'd be able to do a good job. And keeping all of these tracks kind of helps it stay very puzzly. Like, this is a rip where I really tried to keep it very much still like the original song. So, main track, I've got, instead of thinking of it as AACCAAGG, AAAA, I'd think of it as like 0, 0, plus 3, plus 3, 0, 0, minus 2, minus 2, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So here, I can't use B, and it's pretty obvious that maybe 0 should be G, and then it goes G, G, A, A, G, G, F, F. Like, instead of plus 3, I turn into plus 2. That's because that'll keep it on key, I guess. And it still sounds like Puzzle Room, even though you can't go G, G, B, B. It just wouldn't sound right with everything else in the song at all. You can even hear it in the preview. That doesn't sound right, you know? You're thinking of puzzles song. So I ended up doing G, G, A, G, G, F, F, and then I think this is where I cut it off, and it goes back into the normal song. So you see it goes G, G, A, G, G, F, F, sharp, F sharp, F, F sharp, and like the last note here is an F, or that doesn't matter, whatever. It works really well with the way I ended up doing it. So I'm going to keep this length of note. I'm going to click on this note, and then the next note I make will be a clone of that note. So I'm going to just do this. G, A, G, G, F sharp, F sharp. Delete the original notes. Unmute the track, idiot. So that flows really nicely. It kind of keeps the feel of the original song, and this right here where it goes F sharp, F sharp, F, F sharp, like it flows perfectly into where I resumed what the original song was. Alright, so now we're higher up. So even though Puzzle Room has this shift, looks like 5 downwards, but that won't work for this because obviously the song is higher pitched in this half of the loop. So you see, I guess it goes A, G, A, C, so it might make sense. And I decided I'm going to keep the same structure I did this time of having 1 bar Puzzle Room and then 1 bar original. So I've already decided all of these are getting wiped for sure. So option 1 could be shifting this up 5. So like this was the down 5 part of Puzzle Room, and then it goes to the up 5 part, for example. Or it looks like AAGG AACC could work or something. Well, AACC AAGG. So this is where it might be good to just experiment a little bit, but you can copy paste this first of all. Boop. And you can shift their pitch with, you hold shift and use the arrow keys, and they'll go up 1 pitch. You can also use control and up and down, and that will transpose an entire octave. So those are handy shortcuts for moving a group of notes instead of just dragging them. Especially with dragging, you might accidentally move them left or right, and if you don't realize that you did that, that could be bad. Mistime everything. So I guess I'll try this. First of all, I need to delete all these existing notes though, so I'll just get a reminder of what the original sounded like. Alright, so it ends on C sharp, which might be a good idea. Alright, so I'll just wipe that. I'm gonna try this first. Alright, well that's not right at all. I'm gonna try up 3. Well, okay, so that's up 5 from this. But these can't be B. That's illegal. I could try that. I'm not sure if this is gonna work at all. No, that doesn't really work. I think it needs to be up higher, because the Puzzle Room ends on a low note. Yeah, I'm gonna try what I noticed before, how this originally ended with a C sharp. So this should be a good transition to the rest of it. Yeah, that's totally what I did in the rip. Okay, and you can see how this also, naturally being 0 plus 2, 0 minus 2, it uses correct pitches. It uses in-key pitches, so I don't need to shift any specific 2 notes anywhere. One thing I did do is I made the last note just 1, and that's kind of to match the end of Puzzle Room. I should have added free LSD for this. Oh well, I can't play it back, but like the end of Puzzle Room goes do 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 instead of having 2 notes there. So that's kind of what I imitated here, and it also imitates that this bar originally ended with a super long C sharp. And so that's what I did for this part of the song. And now this is just a second loop of it. So I can just copy what I had. One important thing I forgot to mention is note velocity, which is down here. In this case, all the notes are the same volume, but in a lot of cases that won't be the case. You can change the velocity. I've got all these notes selected. I'm holding Alt, and I can use the mouse wheel, and that will change the velocity, which is another word just for the note's volume, as opposed to the channel volume. Individual notes can have their own volume. And it can be another important thing to imitate the original song's note velocities to help it be high quality and sound like the original. In this case, all the notes are the same volume, so there's nothing to change there. So now, there's a change in what the song's doing. It's much shorter notes now, and this part I turned into Continue from Felix the Cat to match the original Puzzle Room rip. It went Puzzle Room and then Continue. And so the, I'm sorry, I've got a Continue MIDI here from Lou90, a Siiva Gunner member. I shouldn't say that. Well, they're in the channel list, whatever. And they actually put an Easter egg in this, but this is on vgmusic.com, which is fairly good for MIDIs. I mean, obviously you want to rip MIDIs directly from the ROM whenever possible, but they have good MIDIs there too. And they did a good job with this MIDI. So you can see there's a silent track, and it's Puzzle Room. Alright. I love that so much. So, here is Felix the Cat. A-E-G-E-F-F-E-F-D. I always forget saying the sharp because that would be another syllable. But, so, I want to put some of this into puzzles. Now I had to think, how do I want to do this? What do I want to keep from the original puzzles? And you can see really that this song is a very short loop. And I decided to ignore this ending part. There wasn't really a good way to implement it. So this is just a really short loop. This is only 2 bars. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. While this is, well, it's also 2 bars, but it's at half the tempo. So it's 4 bars for the purposes of what we need to put in. So I ended up leaving in half of the original melody, and then the other half becomes 1 loop worth of Continue. And so A, A, E. Now, do I want to I can't use AAE. I can't do that. I forget if I shifted it down one or up one. I probably shifted it down one. Well, this is where you could experiment, I guess. So this is A, and then E is down 5. And then it goes up 3. So A, it's like 0, -5, -2. That's how I think of things. It's probably a stupid way to think of things. But, so I'm just going to move this note, because I'm just going to keep the notes where they were. So then this is -5, and this would be -2. You can see as I just moved the notes, and it's already matching the timing of Felix. Like this was already a doubly long note, just like in Felix, and then it has a long silence. That sounds like what I ended up doing in the rip. And, it originally started with a G sharp, so that kind of gives it the same flow the original had. Where were they already? Yeah, and see, you can see the original notes. There was a G sharp, an F sharp, and a D sharp, so it makes sense to use those same pitches in my recreation, as opposed to shifting it from A to A sharp. That would, there is no A sharp in this part of the song. The A sharp is over here, so anyway. That's what I have so far. That's sounding good. This is a large blank space, so I may as well put some more notes from Felix here. So another E. In this case, D sharp, going right there. I'm keeping the same note lengths as the original had here. That became a slide note for some reason. Okay. Did I place it right? No. That's right. There we go. And then up 2. So this is going to be F, which is another pitch that was used in the original. So that's perfect. And this one's only half length. So then right here. And this, alright, so it goes F, F, E, F, C. This seems like it's probably a good place to return to the original. Let me listen to it. Okay, that didn't sound right. Like, it's too busy. I'm gonna try getting rid of that. That sounded weird having 3 Fs in a row. I'm going to try shifting it down 2 to follow where it was in Felix. Alright, I think that's what I ended up doing in the rip, yeah. So and that keeps the nice, like, ramping up of the original. What notes do I have left from Felix? I just have the FD at this point. So, alright, so I keep all this from the original. And so here is where I decide to replicate Felix again. The ending of the little tiny Felix loop. Seems a perfect fit to replace these little notes. So, the end of Felix, E, F, D. In this case, E, F, D is actually D sharp. That would want me to use an E. And that would be a bad sounding thing, probably. Let me see how this sounds. Alright, that wasn't right at all. First of all, it came in too early, which makes sense because this is... Yeah. This is the correct timing as far as the quarter of the bar goes. So this is going to sound better as far as timing. But you can hear that E was just like, oh, that's bad. Even though I'm following the Felix the Cat MIDI, it just can't be that. So I'm going to move this up. Even though these are one note apart, I have to make this an F sharp in this case. Or an F in this case, to sound right. This doesn't sound right either, does it? That doesn't sound right either. The C sharp. Oh yeah, this section never uses a C sharp. It does use a D though. There we go. Yeah, that sounds better. So now I'm going to do the same thing on this part. And this part's not exactly the same, so I do have to be weary of copy pasting. So I'm going to just copy paste like the first half of it here. Where would I want to return to this? Okay, I definitely want the Fs, because that silence is bad. So is this going to be a good transition, or do I need to change something about this A sharp? Yeah, it's like it was way too much of a transition. That sounds nice though. Even though I'm not using this D, I don't really have to, because I used it last time, because otherwise it would have gone F, 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 F sharp, G sharp, and it would have just sounded really repetitive. In this case though, it goes F, F, F sharp, so it's okay for it to return to the normal song at this point. And once again, I will put the little ending to the Felix loop at the ending of this section. And you can see it, there's already an F7 there. That's how perfectly this fits. I'm not deleting any notes from the original here. I'm just adding a D sharp and D to make it Felixy. And that's back to the original loop. I can just copy paste these again. And that's the end of making the puzzles rip. And I don't know if any of this was helpful whatsoever, but it's that easy sometimes. Like, you just gotta have an idea, and you gotta do it, you know? I don't know. And then I'd render this out. I usually use OGG if I'm going to end up opening it in Sony Vegas and like doing a fade out. You can see this MIDI kind of ends in a weird spot. So I ignore that and I render it out in Sony Vegas, and then I add a loop between, for these measures I do a fade out. And then render that as MP3, submit it to Siiva. Everyone loves it because it sounds nice, and if I wasn't explaining things, this literally took me probably 10 minutes to make. Now that's a rare thing for me. Usually it's at least a few hours or a couple days to make a rip. But this one was just, I opened it up, put the pitches in, there was nothing to finagle about it. It just worked beautifully. I think I did a great job I used the entire continue loop melody. I just split it into half, like I have the first 3 quarters here, and then the last quarter here. So it has like the entire continue melody, but then to fill in the space, it has the original melody, and there's like a seamless transition. But yeah, okay. Tutorial over, I guess. I don't know. Hopefully it wasn't too laggy. Hopefully you learned something about sound font ripping. And I'll probably do another, maybe. But okay. Bye.